You watched your father work 60-hour weeks for 25 years. You saw him build a life, provide everything, do what men are supposed to do. Then one Tuesday afternoon when he was 53, your mother sat him down and said she wanted a divorce. No affair, no abuse, no dramatic reason. She just wanted out. And your father, this man who could navigate complex business deals and solve mechanical problems that stumped everyone else, sat there completely blindsided. He never saw it coming. Here's what nobody tells you about why this keeps happening, and why men with ADHD brains are especially vulnerable to this exact pattern. There's a phenomenon happening across the country that family courts see every single day, but that most men remain completely oblivious to until it destroys them. Women over 40, particularly those in their mid-40s to early 50s, are initiating divorce at rates that would shock you. But here's the thing that makes it so devastating for neurodivergent men. These aren't sudden decisions. These women have been planning their exit for years. They've been emotionally divorced for half a decade while still sleeping in the same bed, still showing up to family dinners, still maintaining the appearance of a functional marriage. And the ADHD man in the relationship? He genuinely has no idea. He thinks everything is fine. Maybe not perfect, but fine. Manageable. Normal. The neurotypical world talks about emotional labor like it's this abstract concept. But for the woman married to a neurodivergent man, it becomes something far more concrete and far more exhausting. She's not just managing the household tasks. She's managing his entire executive function. She's the one who remembers that his mother's birthday is next week. She's the one who notices that the kids need new shoes before they're walking around with holes in them. She's the one who recognizes that the weird noise the car is making probably means something important. And she's the one who makes the appointment and writes it down and reminds him 3 times, and then finally just takes the car herself because it's easier than the alternative. For the first 10 or 15 years, she tells herself this is just marriage. This is partnership. Everyone carries different loads. But then something shifts. What shifts is her perception of whether this is going to change. In her 20s and 30s, she believed in potential. She believed that if she just communicated better, if she just explained more clearly, if she just gave him the right system, or the right reminder, or the right incentive, he would start to carry his share of the invisible work that keeps a family functioning. But by her 40s, she's accumulated thousands of data points that tell her otherwise. She's watched him hyper-focus for 16 hours straight on rebuilding a motorcycle engine, while forgetting to pick up their daughter from soccer practice. She's seen him remember every statistic from every game his favorite team played in 1997, while forgetting their anniversary 5 years in a row. She's observed him start 37 different projects with intense enthusiasm, while finishing almost none of them, and she's been the one quietly cleaning up the abandoned materials and managing the disappointed expectations of everyone involved. The ADHD brain genuinely doesn't experience these failures the same way a neurotypical person does. When you forget something important, it doesn't feel like you didn't care enough to remember. It feels like the information just vanished from your accessible memory, despite your best intentions. When you get absorbed in something interesting and lose track of time, it doesn't feel like you're choosing that activity over your responsibilities. It feels like time itself betrayed you, like you looked up and hours had passed in what felt like minutes. When you struggle to start a task you know is important, it doesn't feel like laziness or defiance. It feels like there's a physical barrier between your intention and your action, like trying to push through invisible concrete. But here's what your brain isn't computing. She doesn't experience your subjective reality. She experiences the objective results. She experiences waiting for 2 hours past when you said you'd be home, with no text, no call, no acknowledgement that you even remembered she existed. She experiences explaining the same thing for the 100th time and watching it fail to stick again. She experiences making contingency plans for your contingency plans because she knows from bitter experience that you probably won't follow through. Now let's talk about what happens in her 40s. Her kids are getting older. Maybe they're in high school, maybe they're starting college. The identity she built around intensive mothering is shifting. She's got more time to think, more time to reflect on what her life has become and what she wants the next 30 years to look like. And she starts doing math. Cold, hard math. If she stays, she's going to be managing an adult man's basic functioning for the rest of her life. She's going to be the external hard drive for his memory. She's going to be the alarm system for his time blindness. She's going to be the emotional translator for his social confusion. She's going to be the executive function he never developed. And the question that starts consuming her is simple. Why? Why is she doing all of this for someone who, from her perspective, isn't trying hard enough to change? Here's where the neurodivergent experience creates a catastrophic misunderstanding. You probably are trying. You're trying harder than anyone knows. You're running internal programs all day long to remember things, to stay on track, to notice what needs noticing. You're exhausted from the effort of trying to operate in a world that isn't designed for how your brain works. But she can't see any of that. She sees the results, and the results look identical to not trying. She sees the forgotten appointments, the incomplete tasks, the promises that evaporated. She doesn't see the enormous mental effort you expended before the working memory failure. She doesn't see the genuine intention that was there before the executive dysfunction kicked in. She sees a man who apparently can focus when he wants to, who apparently can remember things that matter to him, and who apparently chooses not to extend that same energy to his family. The resentment builds slowly, then all at once. For years, she swallows it. She compensates. She takes on more and more responsibility because it's easier than fighting about it. She stops asking you to handle things because the mental energy of reminding and checking and fixing is greater than just doing it herself. And here's what you notice. Things seem smoother. There's less conflict. She's not nagging anymore. She's not getting upset about the things she used to get upset about. You think you've reached a new equilibrium. You think maybe she's finally accepted you for who you are. You have no idea that she's not accepted anything. She's detached. She's already gone emotionally. She's stopped investing in the idea that things will change because she's moved into a different phase entirely. She's planning her exit. Women talk to each other in ways men don't always understand. She's been having conversations with her friends, her sisters, maybe her therapist. She's been testing the waters, exploring what divorce looks like, what her finances would be, whether she could make it work. She's been building a support network for after. She's been researching lawyers and housing and how to tell the kids. She's been doing all of this while still packing your lunch and asking about your day and sleeping next to you at night. And because your ADHD brain struggles with reading subtle emotional cues and picking up on patterns of behavior that shift gradually, you miss every single warning sign. If this is making your stomach tight, hit that like button, because we need to talk about how common this actually is. The manosphere will tell you this is about hypergamy or branch swinging or women's nature. They'll say she's looking for someone better, someone with more status, more money, more something. But they're wrong about the mechanism, even if they're sometimes right about the outcome. Most women over 40 who leave aren't leaving for another man. They're leaving for themselves. They're leaving for peace. They're leaving for a life where they only have to manage their own executive function, not someone else's. They're leaving because they did the math and realized that being single is actually less work than being married to you. Let that sink in. She's choosing the stigma of divorce, the financial hit, the complexity of splitting a life, the difficulty of explaining to family and friends, because all of that seems easier than continuing to be your external brain. Here's the part that's going to make you angry. From her perspective, she's been communicating these problems for years. She told you it bothered her when you forgot things. She told you she needed more help with the household management. She told you she felt alone in the mental load of running the family. She had conversations and arguments and tearful late-night talks. And you heard her, you really did. But then your working memory issues and executive dysfunction meant that a week later, you forgot the conversation happened. Or you remembered it happened but forgot the specifics of what she needed. Or you remembered the specifics but couldn't implement them consistently because that's not how ADHD works. From your perspective, you're doing your best, and she's never satisfied. From her perspective, she's been screaming into the void for a decade and you're not listening. The tragedy is that both experiences are real. You genuinely are trying within the constraints of your neurological wiring. She genuinely is drowning in the load of compensating for your executive function deficits. But neither of you has the framework to understand that this isn't about effort or love or commitment. This is about a fundamental mismatch between neurotypes and the complete absence of systems to bridge that gap. The neurotypical world built marriage with certain assumptions about how brains work. It assumed that adults would naturally develop executive function. It assumed that emotional reciprocity would be intuitive. It assumed that if someone cared enough, they'd remember important things. These assumptions don't hold when you introduce a neurodivergent brain into the equation. But nobody told either of you that when you got married. Let's talk about what happens around age 45 to 50 for women specifically, because this is where biology amplifies everything. Perimenopause and menopause change how women's brains process emotion and tolerate frustration. The hormonal shifts that happen during this transition often lead to what's called a personality change, but it's really a priority change. Things she used to tolerate become intolerable. Patience she used to have for other people's dysfunction evaporates. The social conditioning that taught her to be nice, to be accommodating, to put everyone else's needs first starts to crack. She stops caring as much what people think. She stops performing emotional labor she doesn't want to perform. And if she's been carrying resentment about managing your life for 15 years, menopause is gasoline on that fire. There's a reason divorce attorneys talk about the gray divorce boom. Couples who made it through the intense parenting years are splitting up in their 50s and 60s at unprecedented rates. And when you dig into the data, a clear pattern emerges. It's usually her choice. She's the one who wants out. He's usually shocked. He thought they were fine. He thought they were going to retire together, travel, enjoy the grandkids. He had no idea she was counting down the days until the kids were grown so she could leave without as much guilt. This pattern is even more pronounced when the man has undiagnosed or poorly managed ADHD, because the executive function support she's been providing becomes more visible and more exhausting as life gets more complex. Think about what marriage demands as you get older. You're managing aging parents, complicated finances, health issues, property maintenance, social obligations, family coordination. All of these things require planning, follow-through, memory, organization. All the things ADHD brains struggle with most. So while you're both getting older, her burden is getting heavier because your executive function isn't improving and the demands on it are increasing. She looks at the next 30 years and sees herself making every decision, remembering every obligation, managing every system, while you continue to hyper-focus on your interests and forget everything that doesn't naturally grab your attention. And she decides she's done. Here's what makes this especially cruel for neurodivergent men. You often don't have the social network to see it coming. Neurotypical men talk to their friends about their marriages, complain about their wives, get warnings when things seem off. You probably don't do that. Your friendships might be built around shared interests rather than emotional disclosure. You might not have close friends at all because maintaining friendships requires the same executive function skills you struggle with. So you don't have anyone pulling you aside and saying, "Hey, something seems wrong, you should probably pay attention." You're isolated in your own relationship, not reading the signs, not picking up the cues, genuinely believing everything is okay until the day she tells you it's over. The financial devastation that follows is something nobody prepared you for. She gets the house or the equity. You're paying child support if there are still kids at home, possibly alimony. You're starting over in your 50s with half the assets and ongoing financial obligations. And because your ADHD means you probably weren't the one managing the family finances, you're now suddenly responsible for bills and taxes and budgets and all the administrative life tasks she was handling. The executive function demands on you skyrocket exactly when you're emotionally devastated and trying to rebuild your entire life. Men don't generally thrive in this situation. The data on men's well-being after divorce in midlife is dark. Depression, health decline, financial struggle, social isolation. Meanwhile, studies show that women's happiness and health often improve after divorce, particularly when they were in relationships where they carried a disproportionate mental load. Let's get uncomfortable for a moment. Subscribe if you want more truth about relationships that nobody else is willing to say out loud. The men's rights activists will tell you the system is rigged against men, and they're not entirely wrong about the outcomes, even if they're wrong about the causes. But here's what they miss. The system is responding to observable patterns. Family courts see thousands of cases. They see which parent actually knows the kids' teachers' names and medical history. They see which parent has been doing the household management and schedule coordination. They see which parent has the detailed knowledge of how the family functions. And in relationships where the man has unmanaged ADHD, that parent is almost always her. So when custody and assets get divided, the court is looking at who's been doing the actual work of maintaining the family and rewarding that. You might have been providing financially, working hard, loving your kids, but if you couldn't remember to take them to their dentist appointments without her reminding you, the court sees that. The pattern recognition that your ADHD brain is actually good at should be screaming at you right now. If you're married, if you're in your 30s or 40s, if your wife has been gradually becoming more distant, if she stopped complaining about things that used to bother her, if she seems to be building a life that doesn't include you at its center, these are not good signs. The fact that she's not nagging anymore doesn't mean she's happy. It might mean she's given up. The fact that there's less conflict doesn't mean things are better. It might mean she's already emotionally divorced and just waiting for the right time. The fact that she seems fine doesn't mean everything is fine. It might mean she's gotten very good at hiding her real feelings because she's not invested in fixing the relationship anymore. Now here's what your brain wants to do right now. It wants to dismiss this. It wants to say this doesn't apply to you. Your relationship is different, your wife is different, you're managing things well enough. Your brain wants to minimize because acknowledging this is terrifying. But your pattern recognition is trying to save you. Think about the actual evidence. Does she manage most of the household and family coordination? Do you forget important things regularly despite genuinely trying not to? Does she have to remind you about appointments and obligations? Do you start projects and not finish them? Does she seem tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix? Does she seem less interested in you, your thoughts, your interests, your day? Has your sex life declined to near nothing? Do you spend most of your time on your special interests while she handles everything else? Be honest. Really honest. Because if the answer to most of these is yes, you're in dangerous territory. What neurodivergent men need to understand is that good intentions don't pay the bills. Loving your family doesn't mean you're a functional partner. Trying hard within your limitations doesn't compensate for the burden you're placing on someone else. And here's the hardest truth. If you're waiting for her to accept you as you are, to stop expecting you to change, to be okay with carrying the load forever, you're going to wait until she leaves. Because what you're asking for is someone to volunteer for a lifetime of being your caretaker, while getting nothing back that feels like true partnership to her. Some women will do this. Some women have temperaments and neurotypes that make this sustainable for them. But many won't, and they're not wrong for leaving. They're not selfish, they're not unreasonable, they're just done. The worst part is that you probably do love her. You probably appreciate everything she does even if you're not good at expressing it. You probably want to be a better partner. You probably feel guilty about your failures. But love and good intentions don't fix executive dysfunction. Guilt doesn't create working memory. Appreciation doesn't translate into consistent follow-through. And she's been living with this gap between your feelings and your actions for so long that she no longer believes the feelings matter if the actions never change. Let's talk about what actually happens to men after this kind of divorce. You're going to cycle through a predictable pattern. First is shock and denial. You're going to be absolutely blindsided even though all the signs were there. You're going to feel ambushed, betrayed, confused about how this could happen. Then comes the desperate attempt to fix it. You're suddenly going to have perfect clarity about all the things you should have been doing. You're going to promise to change, to get help, to be better. You're going to mean it with every fiber of your being, and she's going to be unmoved because she's heard this before, or because she's already so far past done that your promises are just noise. Then comes anger. You're going to feel the injustice of trying your best within your limitations and having it not be enough. You're going to resent her for not accepting you, for giving up, for not trying harder. Then eventually, if you're lucky, you'll get to acceptance and maybe understanding. But that journey takes years, and those years are brutal. During this time, your ADHD symptoms typically get worse because stress amplifies executive dysfunction. You're going to miss court dates, forget to pay bills on time, lose important documents, fail to follow through on custody arrangements. Every failure is going to be used as evidence that you're not a responsible parent. Every forgotten obligation is going to confirm her narrative about why she had to leave. And you're going to be doing all of this without the external support system she provided. She was your calendar, your alarm clock, your reminder system, your organizer. Now you're operating without that infrastructure, and you're expected to function at the same level or better. It's a setup for failure. Here's something that might save you if you're willing to hear it. The time to fix this is before she's done, not after. Not when she tells you she wants a divorce, before. When she's still complaining, she's still invested. When she's still getting upset about things, she still cares. When she's still trying to get you to change, there's still hope in her. The danger zone is when she stops. When she gets quiet. When she stops expecting anything from you. That's when you should be terrified. But that's usually when ADHD men relax because the conflict decreased. If you want to interrupt this pattern, you need to do something you're probably really bad at. You need to take ownership of your executive function deficits in a way that stops making them her problem. This doesn't mean magically curing your ADHD. This means building external systems that don't rely on her being your brain. This means medication, if that's appropriate. This means therapy specifically focused on adult ADHD. This means apps, alarms, calendars, reminders, accountability outside your marriage. This means hiring help for things you genuinely can't do consistently. This means recognizing which tasks are never going to be your strong suit and finding solutions that don't involve her doing them. Drop a comment if you've ever been blindsided by a breakup you didn't see coming, because I guarantee you're not alone in this experience. The reality is that many neurodivergent men end up in multiple failed relationships following the exact same pattern. You meet someone, there's intensity and novelty in the beginning, which your ADHD brain loves. You're attentive during the hyperfocus phase of new relationship energy. She thinks this is who you are. Then you settle into patterns, the novelty wears off. Your executive dysfunction becomes apparent. She starts compensating. You let her because it's easier, and you don't fully realize the burden it creates. Years pass. She gets tired. She leaves. You're devastated. You eventually meet someone else. The pattern repeats. Each time you're convinced this person is different, this time will be different. But if you're not addressing the underlying executive function issues, nothing is different. You're just finding new people to eventually exhaust. Let's talk about the kids for a minute, because this affects them in ways you might not be considering. When mom leaves dad, the kids know why, even if nobody says it explicitly. They've watched her manage everything. They've seen him forget their events, miss their games, promise things that didn't happen. They love you, but they also see the reality of who does the work. And when the divorce happens, they often align more with her, not because she turned them against you, but because she's been their reliable parent. The one who knew their schedules, handled their needs, showed up consistently. Your relationship with your kids after divorce often suffers because now you have to do the executive function work of parenting without her backup, and you're probably not good at it. Missed pickups, forgotten supplies, chaotic visits with no structure. The kids feel it. They might not want to come to your place because it's disorganized and stressful. And this breaks your heart, but you don't know how to fix it because you're still struggling with the same executive function issues that contributed to the divorce in the first place. There's a specific type of grief that comes with this experience. It's not just losing your marriage. It's the realization that your brain works fundamentally differently in ways that make you a burden to people you love. It's understanding that what feels like trying your hardest isn't enough. It's the isolation of having an invisible disability that nobody takes seriously, because you can focus perfectly fine on video games or your special interests. It's the shame of being an adult man who can't seem to do basic adult things consistently. It's the loneliness of knowing that explaining your internal experience doesn't change the external results. Most men don't have frameworks for processing this kind of grief. You're supposed to be strong, to provide, to have your life together. Admitting that your brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to feels like admitting you're defective, so you don't talk about it. You don't seek help. You just keep failing in the same ways while hating yourself more each time. What makes this especially dark is that society has no sympathy for you. If you were a woman with ADHD struggling in relationships, there would be support groups, understanding, resources. As a man, you're just seen as lazy, as a man-child, as someone who needs to grow up and take responsibility. Nobody wants to hear that you're trying, and your brain won't cooperate. Nobody cares that you feel terrible about your failures. They just see a grown man who can't remember to take out the trash without being reminded, who can't plan a vacation without someone else doing all the work, who can't maintain friendships or show up on time or finish what he starts. From the outside, you look like you don't care. From the inside, you're drowning. Let's be absolutely clear about something. This is not about excusing dysfunction. This is not about saying women should just accept being overwhelmed because their partner has ADHD. This is not about removing accountability. This is about understanding that there's a neurological basis for behaviors that look like character flaws. And that understanding is the first step toward actually addressing the problem instead of just failing over and over while everyone gets more resentful. But understanding only matters if it leads to action. If you just use ADHD as an explanation for why you can't change, you're going to end up exactly where we started. Alone, confused about what happened, and probably headed toward the same pattern in your next relationship. The women who leave usually don't want to leave. They wanted partnership. They wanted a teammate. They wanted someone who would grow and build a life with them. They didn't sign up to be a caretaker for an adult man. And the tragedy is that you probably wanted to be that partner. You probably had every intention of being a good husband, a present father, a contributing member of the household. But intention and execution are different things, and ADHD is fundamentally a disorder of execution. You can intend all day long, and your brain will still fail to initiate the task, maintain focus on boring but necessary things, remember what you're supposed to do, or organize complex multi-step processes. Without intervention, without systems, without real support, your good intentions are just unfulfilled promises that pile up until they bury your relationship. Here's the reality that nobody wants to say out loud. Some relationships can't be saved. If she's already done, if she's already made her plan, if she's already emotionally detached, your chances of turning it around are minimal. You can't negotiate someone back into loving you. Can't convince someone to stay who's been trying to leave for years. What you can do is learn from it. What you can do is get real help for your executive function issues, so the next relationship doesn't follow the same pattern. What you can do is develop enough self-awareness to recognize when someone is taking on too much of your load and address it before they burn out. What you can do is stop expecting love to be enough when love without functional support is just sentiment. The question you need to ask yourself is simple but brutal. If your wife left tomorrow, could you function? Could you manage the household, the bills, the schedule, the obligations? Could you maintain your job, your health, your home, your relationships without her infrastructure? If the answer is no, then you're not a partner. You're a dependent. And at some point, she's going to realize she didn't sign up to have another child. She signed up to have a husband. The timeline for when she realizes this and when she does something about it is variable, but the pattern is consistent. By the time she's in her mid-40s, she's often done pretending it's okay. This is where we are. This is the reality. Across the country, women over 40 are walking away from marriages to neurodivergent men who never saw it coming. Family courts are rewarding them with custody and assets because they were the ones doing the actual work. Men are being financially and emotionally destroyed in midlife because they couldn't see the pattern until it was too late. Kids are choosing to spend more time with mom because dad's place is chaotic, and the next generation of neurodivergent boys is growing up with the same undiagnosed or poorly managed executive function issues, headed toward the same outcomes, because nobody's willing to have the honest conversation about what this actually is and what it actually takes to prevent it. If you're still watching, you know this matters. This is your life we're talking about. This is your future. Pay attention before it's too late.